Thank you very much. Medical error is a matter of special concern and interest to many of the people in this room tonight. In this room are nurses, doctors, and lawyers, all of whom well know the toll, the terrible toll that medical mistakes exact. More deaths each year than homicides, suicides, and drug overdoses combined. For Consumer Watchdog, the medical malpractice issue is not just about our quest for a healthcare system that puts people over profits. It's about defeating the insurance industry's 30-year campaign to scapegoat the victims of medical malpractice and limit their compensation for their injuries. Excuse me. Malpractice is a particularly tough issue to work on because it happens behind closed doors, away from the Klieg lights and the TV cameras. That is, until one day when one of America's most famous movie actors carried his newborn twins through the doors of one of this city's most well-known hospitals. Probably like most people, I assumed that Thomas Boone and Zoe Grace would get a level of medical care that reflected their internationally renowned dad, Dennis Quaid. Maybe they got what passed for that level of care back then, I don't know. Either way, it wasn't good enough, and an accident waiting to happen, in fact, had happened a year earlier to other kids in another hospital, happened to Dennis and Kimberly's twins. When I spoke with Dennis and Kimberly a few months later, there was sadness and the remnants of terror in their voices, but there was also a determination to make something good come out of their experience. Dennis, who's a pilot, pointed out to me that America had made its aviation system 99% error-free, and he could not understand why our healthcare system lacked a similar commitment. To pursue that goal, they set up the Quaid Foundation, and Dennis made it very clear to me that he intended to put his celebrity to work for the cause. Here's how the American people learned about medical mistakes and bedside barcoding thanks to the Quaid family. Let's see that brief video.
Our newborn twins recently received a near-fatal overdose of blood-thinning medication, heparin, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Our 12-day-old infants were mistakenly injected not once, but twice, over an 8-hour period with a massive overdose of 10,000 units of the anticoagulant drug. Their blood was basically turned to the consistency of water, and they were severely bruised and bleeding out of every place they'd been poked or prodded. And they had made it. It made me feel that they had survived for a reason.
Actor Dennis Quaid is a believer that computerized health systems save lives. In 2007, his newborn twins were the victims of a terrible medical mistake.
About a week after we brought them home from the hospital, they started to develop what turned out to be a staph infection.
Our doctor told us to take them over to Cedars. So they told us that they'd have to, be checked into the hospital and be put on antibiotics.
A series of errors led to a life-threatening mistake.
They got 1,000 times the dose of heparin that they were supposed to get. They were supposed to get 10 units of heparin, and they got 10,000 units of heparin.
Thank God they pulled through. Yeah.
Are they?
They're doing great.
But Dennis Quaid became a man with a mission. He began researching hospital errors, immersing himself in medical journals, even testifying before a congressional committee.
Up to 100,000 patients in the United States alone die in hospitals every year because of medical errors. That's the equivalent of one major airline crash a day, every single day of every year.
So how could information technology have prevented Dennis Quaid's ordeal? Easy. Barcodes.
There is a barcode in every checkout stand in every supermarket in America. Why can't there be one in hospitals?
Since this medical mistake made headline news, Cedars-Sinai has installed a computer barcode system for their medications, helping to eliminate human error. Patient information must be entered into a computer and then checked and rechecked.
This is our bedroom.
Computers are also tied into automatic dispensing machines.
Well, yeah, these have been in place back when our kids were here.
Yeah.
I don't think it could have occurred.
So, Dennis, you said that this was for a reason, and now you're now using the voice of your family to change things.
I think that what their reason is to raise public awareness and to get something done about computerized record keeping and barcoding in hospitals that's going to save lives, a lot of lives.
Our new
Saving lives. Dennis's widely publicized victory with Cedars on electronic record keeping set a new standard of care for hospitals around the country. And it got the attention of the new president. A year after Dennis first brought the issue to the national consciousness, the Obama stimulus bill set aside $3 billion for computerization of medical records to reduce medical error. $3 billion. But there's more. There's more. When Dennis testified before Congress, the United States Supreme Court had just ruled that the manufacturer of a defective heart catheter could not be sued simply because the notoriously lax Food and Drug Administration had approved the device. Next up on the Supreme Court's docket, whether the FDA's approval of a drug and its labeling also precluded patients from suing the manufacturer under state laws. Now, I found it very interesting that, like many Americans, Dennis had believed that frivolous lawsuits were a big problem in our country. But testifying before Congress, Dennis stood up for the right of injured people to have their day in court. His powerful testimony reverberated around the country. Suddenly, this arcane issue of federal preemption of state laws took center stage, and Congress threatened to overturn any further encroachments by the United States Supreme Court. That message was heard loud and clear across the street from the Capitol. Last winter, the Supreme Court ruled that lawsuits against drug companies could proceed after all. People who watch the court closely think that without Dennis's testimony and the publicity surrounding his case, the court would have gone the other way. Now, no one would choose to go through the devastating experience that befell the Quaid family. Those who do often, understandably, prefer to move on. And with a seemingly unlimited number of movies in the works, Dennis Quaid easily could have. But he didn't. In fact, right tonight, he could be out promoting his new movie, Pandorum, which opened yesterday, or just taking it easy with his family. But he's here. I'm proud to call Dennis Quaid a friend of mine and a friend of Consumer Watchdog. He's become a hero to patients and healthcare providers all over the country. One-on-one, he's a really funny, generous, caring, regular guy. Ladies and gentlemen, just off the plane from London, where he's shooting a new movie in which he plays President Bill Clinton, this year's winner of the Philip Burton Public Service Award, Dennis Quaid.
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for showing up. And why did you laugh that I'm playing Bill Clinton? It's immediate, the resemblance, isn't it? It's very interesting. The most interesting fact I found out about Bill Clinton and playing him, and I knew him, spent time with him back in the 90s, is that he has no eyebrows. Very sparse eyebrows. When you put on the hair, all of a sudden to realize that. So that's my fun fact for the evening. But thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here, and I accept this award really on behalf of my beautiful wife, Kimberly, and our two little miracles, Thomas Boone and Zoe Grace. We call them T-Boone and ZG. And before the near tragedy that nearly took their lives, I tell you the truth, I had never been an activist, politically or otherwise. In fact, I'd never played an activist on TV. And my career goes back to Marcus Welby, I'm telling you. But I was involved in a few charities, and most notably the International Hospital for Children, which is out of New Orleans. And what we did is we would go down to Central America, and we built clinics in rural areas of Central America and supply them with medical supplies and essential equipment. And we would identify kids and bring them to the United States for medical treatment that they couldn't get in their own countries. And at that time in my life, which goes back about 20 years with that, I really had complete confidence in our own medical system here. I'd had a few stays in the hospital myself, and they'd all gone without any kind of complications or incidents. And I always had complete confidence that the doctors and the nurses knew what they were doing and that they never made mistakes. But it turns out that doctors and nurses do make mistakes because they're human. Just like us, we all make mistakes. I mean, the only difference is if I make a mistake in my business, it's called take two, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, whatever it takes. You know, in the medical profession, it really a mistake could mean life or death, and it was. That's what it was. It was a medical mistake that nearly cost our twins their lives. And I just want to say, right here and now, that I still revere doctors and nurses. That in so many ways, I mean, your dedication and your compassion and your expertise just make this a better world for all of us. You're so tireless. And I still believe, that America has the best medical care in the world, if you can afford it. Our babies, they came very close to death. We've seen in the video that was already up there. They did receive, 1,000 times the dose of heparin, which is a blood thinner, twice. And it was completely unavoidable if there'd been the basic technology available. It turned their blood to water. It was for my wife and I, it was really the most terrifying event of our lives. And for our babies, but they couldn't tell us how they felt. Except that they were screaming and crying, and they were bruised and bleeding from every place that they'd been poked or prodded. And their suffering went on for about 40 hours until their coagulation, their blood's ability to coagulate, returned to a normal level. And they survived, we believe, really thanks to the power of prayer. Ours and countless others out there who had heard about what had happened to them through the media or whatever. And today, I'm so happy to report that T-Boone and ZG are completely normal and healthy, 21-month-old toddlers, and they're running circles around the house. Thank you. Hedonist never has a bad day. He's always, it's like he's running from air. He's just happy as can be. Hey, how are you? And she's just going to rule the world, and she's a fashionista, and even at that age. And they just fill the house with their laughter and make everybody just crack up. And we were very fortunate to have a happy ending. And I must say that I really would not be here tonight if we had not had a happy ending. And the same thing that happened to our little guys happened to in Indianapolis a year before that and killed 3 infants. And it wound up happening again about 9 months later after in Corpus Christi, and killed 2 other fraternal twins, in fact, a boy and a girl. Their survival was the beginning of my activism. And, but in the following weeks after we got home from, finally made it home and started start life as a family. Again, there were so many people that approached my wife and I and offering their support, and then people just began to tell us their own story about how they or a loved one or a friend of theirs had been injured or killed by a medical mistake. And then about a month later, Mr. Harvey Rosenfeld, who so graciously introduced me, thank you very much. And at that time, he and I were just acquaintances. I used to show up at his door with my son Jack, where he and Cody went to the same school, and they would hang out, and we'd say hi, hey, how are you doing? Hey, great. And but anyway, he called and offered his support, and then he sent my wife and I a book that he had written. It was called Silent Violence, Silent Death. It was about the hidden problems of medical malpractice. And about a couple of weeks later, I was on a plane from New York to LA, and I started reading it, and I read it all the way through. And that was the beginning of my education about our modern yet archaic medical system that we have here in this country. And his book and our subsequent conversations inspired me to learn more about what could be done to make sure that what happened to our sweet little babies maybe would not happen to somebody else's loved one. So, I mean, I don't have to tell you people this, that these people at Consumer Watchdog, I mean, they're pit bulls. But they're our pit bulls. That's what's so wonderful about it. As political activists and advocates, they've really made a difference in all of our lives, and their diligence and on important issues that may or may not be on the front burner of the 24-hour news cycle, and their rage for justice and their compassion for people make them an organization so worthy of your generous donations and support. And I know from personal experience, because I've been working with them ever since, and Harvey Rosenfeld, and also the media darling of the night, of the moment, Mr. Jamie Court, they've been an incredible resource to our cause. Because of them, I went from being someone who just really tried to stay out of politics, please, to being that guy who testified on Capitol Hill. I went from somebody who rarely read even the articles in Newsweek or Time about the medical industry to staying up at night researching medical journals on the internet and touring hospitals around the country to learn more about things like electronic record keeping and CPOE, which is computerized physician order entry, and bedside barcoding, which has become a real cause for my wife and I. And this was all during the Bush administration, before this issue of health care reform came to the forefront of the national debate. Now today there's a lot of noise out there about health care reform, but a few good things I think have been happening. There's $19 billion which has been set aside really for spending on medical IT. And that includes electronic record keeping and CPOE and bedside barcoding. And right now, the medical industry is the only major industry in the country which is still using paper records. And why is that? But the innovation of modern technology is going to save lives, and it's going to save a lot of taxpayer money, but it's definitely got to be done without invading people's privacy, that's for sure, and it can be done. It is going to actually empower us as patients, because we will have more control over our own medical records, and we'll have more knowledge about what we're paying for, basically. My family we're really proud to have been part of the national discussion on health care, and we're optimistic that good things are going to come from all this wrangling and haggling that's going on in Washington right now. But we are really proud of T-Boone and ZG, because those two, they're the ones, they've really changed the world, and they're still in diapers. Because of their near tragedy, Cedars-Sinai Hospital here in Los Angeles has spent close to $100 million on electronic record keeping and CPOE and bedside barcoding and sterile cockpits and all kinds of safety measures, and they have really raised the standard of care for all hospitals all across the nation as far as patient safety. I applaud that. T-Boone and ZG have already saved God knows how many lives, because now in Cedars-Sinai, a barcode scanner that's found in every gas station across America can catch a mistake by a caregiver in a hospital room if they are giving the wrong medicine to the wrong patient. So ZG and T-Boone have turned lemons into lemonade. And that's why I'm here. I'm here for them, to honor them, and to accept this award for them. Thank you so much. God bless you all.